What if Ned Stark had confronted Stannis face to face at Dragonstone before Joffrey took the throne? The true heir revealed, alliances broken, and the war for Westeros ignited in fire and blood. The Raven left Winterfell before the snow, its message brief, coded, urgent, carried by trusted hand straight to Dragonstone, where storms carved the cliffs and fire still echoed in Stannis Baratheon's cold halls. Ned Stark had made his choice. He would not trust Littlefinger's schemes. He would not confront Cersei alone in King's Landing. Instead, he rode from the capital under the cover of night, not north to safety but southeast to Dragonstone, to meet the one man he believed still clung to honor in a kingdom ruled by liars. 3 days before Robert Baratheon's death, Ned Stark's ship sliced through the choppy waters of Blackwater Bay, its sails lowered to avoid suspicion. With only a small group of Stark men and trusted guards, Ned stepped onto the shores of Dragonstone for the first time, wind howling round the ancient fortress once home to the Targaryens. Every moment was a gamble. If Robert died while Ned was away, if Joffrey was crowned, if Cersei moved against him, it could all be over, but he knew the truth. Jon Arryn had died for it. Robert's children were not his. The throne did not belong to Joffrey, it belonged to Stannis. But here was the problem. Stannis had always been the shadow behind the storm, unloved, unyielding, and, too many, untrustworthy. He had not even claimed the throne yet. In fact, he had said nothing. So Ned came not just to speak truth, but to push Stannis to act before. It was too late. The moment they met was colder than the wind outside. "You should not be here, Stark," Stannis said, with that expressionless, fireless face of his. "You should be in Winterfell." "And yet here I am," Ned replied, pulling a sealed letter from inside his cloak, "because the future of the realm may hang on what we decide in this room." They stood alone in the old war room, painted table before them, dragons and mountains carved in ancient wood. The fire in the hearth barely touched Stannis's pale skin. Ned told him everything, about Jon Arryn, about Gendry, about the black hair that should have run through all of Robert's children, about Cersei's deception, and about Robert's coming death. He expected anger, fury. Instead, Stannis closed his eyes and said, "I suspected, but I needed proof. You have it now." A pause, a long one. "Then we act," Stannis said, "but not alone." Ned's arrival changed everything. If he had stayed in King's Landing, he would have been betrayed within days. But now, his decision brought urgency to Dragonstone and danger. Because, in the Red Keep, Queen Cersei began to feel something unfamiliar: panic. Varys whispered that Ned had vanished. Littlefinger had lied to her face, and when Robert died, she moved swiftly, placing Joffrey on the throne before the body was cold. But now the crown was contested not by rumor, but by a public declaration. Stannis, with Ned Stark's full support, sent letters to every corner of the realm. The ink was sharp, the tone sharper. Joffrey was a bastard. The Iron Throne was a lie. The true king was Stannis Baratheon, and he demanded allegiance. This letter, signed by Ned Stark himself, shattered Westeros. Lords who had doubted Stannis now paused. If Ned Stark stood beside him, the North would follow. The Vale might listen. Even the Reach, long loyal to the Baratheons, could be moved. But just as important, this gave Renley Baratheon no time to act. Renley had not yet left King's Landing. He still plotted, still whispered, but with Ned's sudden departure and Stannis's sudden claim, Renley found himself cornered, unprepared to challenge. yet too proud to bend the knee. Back at Dragonstone, Ned and Stannis strategized with rare unity. They were not friends, never had been, but they shared something rarer than friendship and unwavering code, honor, duty, and now urgency. King's Landing must be taken before they fortify, Stannis said. It must be taken without burning it to the ground, Ned replied coldly. The people are not our enemies. Stannis gave a curt nod. Then we take it swiftly. But here's where it gets insane. Catelyn Stark received no raven. Her husband had vanished from King's Landing. Robb received no orders, and the Lannisters, they assumed Ned was dead or plotting in the shadows. Cersei began arresting Stark men across the city, unaware that Ned had sidestepped her net entirely and was preparing to march with the rightful heir. Renley Baratheon stood before the Iron Throne as Joffrey's coronation began, lips tight, eyes calculating. He didn't believe Joffrey was Robert's son, he never had. But he also didn't believe in Stannis. Not the way Ned Stark now did. Stannis was a blade sharp, cold, unforgiving. Renly was a torch burning with ambition, charisma, and entitlement, and he knew something had shifted. Word spread through the capital like wildfire. Ned Stark had vanished, and now ravens were flying, signed by both Stark and Stannis. The city began to buzz. The streets of Flea Bottom echoed with rumors. Joffrey's a bastard. The North won't kneel. Stannis is coming. Cersei doubled the guards. Varys slipped through corridors in silence. Pycelle stammered in small council meetings, unsure whether to back the boy king or wait to see who truly held power. But the biggest shock hit Tywin Lannister, deep in the Westerlands. Tywin received a raven with Ned's seal, a rare thing, inside Stannis' claim. But more dangerous than the words was the signature below. Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, Warden of the North, standing beside Stannis. That wasn't rebellion, that was alliance. Strategic, bold, and, above all, credible. Tywin's first reaction wasn't anger, it was calculation. Stannis is no fool, he said, pacing before Seer Kavon. And Ned Stark is no liar. Together, they are dangerous. The Lannisters couldn't delay. Jaime, still holding Riverrun hostage, received new orders. March on Harrenhal, be ready to strike at the Crownlands. Meanwhile, at Dragonstone, Stannis prepared for war. Ships were being built, ravens sent daily. Davos, Seaworth, still a smuggler at heart, but now Stannis' closest ally, coordinated the fleet. If we're to take King's Landing, we must cut off Blackwater Bay, Davos warned. Seal it tight, like a clenched fist. Ned, for his part, remained focused on justice. We don't burn the city. We don't sack the capital. We take it, and we put a true king on the throne. But others had started to gather, those who wanted blood. Seer, Beric, Dondarrion rode from the Stormlands with loyal men, pledging to Stannis not for gold, but for law. From the Vale, whispers came that Lysa Arryn had received her raven and refused to act. She still sees ghosts in every shadow, Ned muttered. She won't move. Then we don't wait, Stannis said. The longer we delay, the more. Rats gather, and gather they did. Renly, still in King's Landing, met privately with Loras Tyrell. We must move now, Renly said, hands shaking with purpose. My brother will burn the realm to rule it. We can't allow that. You're not next in line, Loras whispered. I have more men. I have the reach. And if I ride now, if I ride tonight, I can beat him to the throne. Thus, Renly fled the capital with a small entourage, heading south to Highgarden to summon the full might of House Tyrell. What should have been a civil transition became a looming three-way war. Stannis, Renley, and the boy King Joffrey, but something was missing. Or rather, something hadn't yet awakened. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen felt the fire stir. News of Robert's death reached her in Karth. She was pregnant again this time. The child lived. The red comet streaked across the sky, and the dragons whispered. Back in Westeros, tensions boiled. Ned sent a raven to Winterfell. Hold, do not march. Trust in my word. Robb read the message aloud. Maester Luwin nodded. Your father acts not in anger, but in strategy. But Theon Greyjoy scoffed Stannis. He's no king of mine. Robb silenced him with a glare. My father made his choice. We follow. Meanwhile, the Riverlands burned. The mountain, sent by Tywin, torched villagers along the Trident. He sent no banners, no warning, only carnage. This wasn't war, it was bait. He wanted to draw Ned back, separate him from Stannis, pull the North into a personal conflict. But Ned didn't take the bait. Instead, he sent Arya away disguised, protected, smuggled onto a boat headed for White Harbor. If I fall, you must return home, he'd whispered to her before she left. Remember who you are, and Cersei, she struck first. On the 4th day of Joffrey's reign, she ordered the execution of Sansa's direwolf, a message. She told the small council, to the north, to Stark. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a warning. She still held Sansa, she still had leverage. But Ned had already written to Catelyn, do not return. Stay in the Riverlands, protect our daughter. Catelyn, furious and grieving, travelled to Riverrun to rally her kin. She met her father's eyes and said, they will not kill my daughter. I'll see to it myself. Meanwhile, in Dragonstone, a storm rose. Stannis' army was ready. Davos had assembled 50 ships. The plan, land near Duskendale, then march on the capital. Speed is our ally, Ned urged. We strike before they expect us. And yet, just as sails unfurled and war drums beat, a red woman stepped from the shadows. Mela, she had arrived 2 days earlier, claiming visions, claiming fire showed her truth. She spoke to Stannis of kingship and prophecy. You are the Lord's chosen, she whispered, the sword of light, the prince that was promised. Ned watched her from across the room. I don't trust her, he told Davos. Nor do I, Davos replied. But she has Stannis' ear, and that was the beginning of something dangerous, because now Stannis began to change. He still wore the same frown, gave the same orders, but he spoke more of destiny, less of law, more of burning. You're not a god, Ned said flatly one night. No. Stannis replied, but gods may be with me. And yet even with tension rising between them, they sailed, side by side, toward King's Landing. And that's where we leave it for now. But before you blink, Renly will crown himself. The Tyrells will choose a side, and the dragons, oh, they're watching, so don't go anywhere, because the real war for the Iron Throne, it's about to begin. Renly Baratheon stood on the steps of Highgarden, rose petals beneath his boots and thousands of Tyrell men before him. His crown shimmered gold in the summer sun, not the Baratheon stag alone, but entwined with a flowering rose. The realm didn't need fury, he told them. It needed charm. It needed beauty. It needed hope. Stannis will burn the world to rule its ashes, Renly declared. I will give you peace and prosperity. And the Reach believed him. Loras Tyrell at his side, placed the crown on his head. All hail Renley Baratheon, first of his name. The lords cried, and just like that, the war had a third king. But Renly's timing was off, because by the time he raised his banner, Ned and Stannis were already sailing. Davos's ships cut through Blackwater Bay like knives, catching the gold cloaks off guard. At dawn, Stannis's men landed north of the city and began marching with terrifying discipline. The plan was clean. No sacking, no fire, no mercy. Ned rode with the vanguard, snow-white direwolf banners beside the black stag of Stannis. It was a sight Westeros had never seen north and Stormlands, united for justice. Inside, the Red Keep, panic. Joffrey screamed. Cersei raged. The small council fractured. Hold the gates, she ordered. Summon every man in the city. The king must be defended. But the people, they didn't cheer. They didn't rally. They watched from windows. From shadows, they remembered Ned Stark riding out of King's Landing in silence. They remembered the boy king's cruelty. And now they whispered, maybe Joffrey isn't the true heir. Meanwhile, Tywin Lannister moved fast. He abandoned Harrenhal and began his march east. If Stannis takes the capital, we lose everything, he told Sir Keivon. Jaime will strike from the south, I will strike from the west. The city must not fall. But something else stirred in the east. Someone with no banners, no fleet, just fire. Daenerys. The red comet still hung in the sky. Her child grew strong, and her dragons, they had doubled in size. Back in King's Landing, the storm broke. Stannis' army reached the gates within days. Ned met with Seer Barristan Selmy under a white flag. You served the realm, Ned said. You know Joffrey has no claim. Selmy's jaw tightened. And you trust Stannis? I trust the law. It was enough. Seer Barristan opened the gates that night, quietly, without bloodshed, and the storm came flooding in. The Red Keep was taken with minimal resistance. The gold cloaks already half paid by Littlefinger didn't fight. Joffrey screamed as he was dragged from the throne room, his crown torn from his head by Seer. Davos, Cersei, she tried to flee. With Sansa, with Tommen, with whatever she could carry. But Ned Stark found her in Maegor's holdfast. She didn't beg, she didn't cry. She stared at him with venom in her eyes and whispered, you think this ends with you on top? You've doomed your house, Stark. Ned said nothing. He turned and walked away, leaving her to be imprisoned under guard, for the first time in decades. The Iron Throne was empty. In the great hall, torchlight flickered against the stone walls. Lords gathered. Ser Davos, Ser Barristan, Grand Maester. Pycelle silent now, but present. Ned stood beside the throne, and Stannis walked forward. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He simply said, by right of birth and law of succession, I claim the Iron Throne. And Ned knelt. That moment rippled across Westeros. In the north, Robb read the Raven and said nothing. But Maester Luwin saw the glint of pride in his eyes in Riverrun. Catelyn gripped the letter and wept not for fear, but for hope. Her daughters might yet be safe. In Storm's End, Renly stared at the news in disbelief. He took the city, he whispered. Already, Loras said nothing. Renly crushed the letter in his fist. Then we march. We will take it back. And suddenly, the war shifted again, because Renly had the numbers. The Reach could feed an army for years. The Tyrell cavalry was unmatched. And while Stannis had the throne, Renly now had the hunger, And then the raven came from the wall. Jeor, Mormont's letter was simple. The dead do not rest. Wildlings flee south. A darkness rises beyond the wall. It was signed with fire, and blood. Jon Snow read it in silence. Then he looked up at Ghost, who snarled at the horizon. Meanwhile, in the dungeons of the Red Keep, something else stirred. Cersei had not wasted her time. She whispered to the guards, promised gold, promised secrets. And somewhere in the black cells, Varys listened. But here's where it gets absolutely crazy. Stannis didn't sit the throne, not right away. He sat in council chambers. He rebuilt the King's Guard. He named Davos his hand, and he demanded that Ned Stark remain in King's Landing to keep me honest, he said. And yet, he spoke more and more with Melisandre. He began burning the Seven's altars. He issued decrees in the name of R, single quotes, HLLR. Ned watched and worried. We didn't fight to replace one tyranny with another, he said. But Stannis only replied, I am the sword of truth. The flames have shown me. Tension grew again, and then came the first execution. Not of Joffrey, not of Cersei, of Gendry, the bastard of Robert Baratheon, taken from his cell, dragged to the courtyard, sacrificed in the flames by hand. The blood of kings awakens dragons, she said. And Ned snapped. He stormed into the chamber, slammed his sword on the council table, and shouted, This is not justice. This is madness. But Stannis didn't flinch. You knew who I was when you came to me. Justice is fire. And just like that, their alliance cracked. You still watching, because now the throne is won, but peace, that's slipping fast. Renley is coming. The north is restless. The dragons stir. And Ned Stark, he's about to face his greatest test yet. Ned Stark paced the echoing halls of the Red Keep, his boots falling heavy on the stone. Gendry's screams still haunted him. The scent of burnt flesh clung to the air, despite the servants' efforts. King's Landing had been taken without a siege, but now it rotted from within. He had thought the greatest danger was Cersei. He was wrong. Stannis had changed. Not in voice, not in expression, but in purpose. Melisandre's presence had infected his decisions. Her whispers carried more weight than any counsel. Ned had once believed that truth would save the realm. Now, truth was being burned at the stake, sacrificed to visions and fire. And still, the people feared Joffrey more. They remembered Ned's calm honor. They remembered Stannis' justice. But justice, twisted by fire, that was something new, something terrifying. In the small council chamber, Ned challenged him again. We don't rule through fear, he said. You want to be king. Be one the people can live under, not one they must kneel before or burn. Stannis barely looked at him. Fear keeps order. Fire keeps the truth. And what of law? What of mercy? Stannis stood. Mercy is weakness. Robert's mercy gave us Cersei. My justice gave us peace. But peace was already fracturing. Renley had marched with over 80,000 men, the Reach, now surrounded King's Landing from the south. Campfires lit the night like stars. Banners of green and gold fluttered in the breeze. Renley sent a raven, penned by Loras Tyrell. Surrender the throne. Let the realm live, or we shall take it. In blood, Stannis didn't flinch. Let him come, but Ned went to the walls and looked down at the sea of tents and thought only of one thing. War would destroy everything they had just reclaimed. He pleaded with Stannis. Parley with your brother. Spare the realm. Stannis gritted his teeth. He is not my brother anymore. And so, Ned took a risk. He sent a raven to Renley without Stannis' approval. He offered a meeting. Neutral ground. Just the two of them, and somehow Renley agreed. They met at dawn beside the Blackwater Rush. No banners, no guards, just Ned Stark and Renly Baratheon. Renly smiled the moment he saw him. You look worse than I remember, and you look far too pleased with yourself. They sat on opposite ends of a flat rock. Ned wasted no time. Your brother has the law, the line of succession, the capital, and the armies of the Stormlands and the North behind him. And I have the reach, Renly replied, and half the lords of Westeros. Do you want the throne? Ned asked, or do you want peace? Renly didn't answer immediately. He looked to the horizon. You believe in Stannis? I don't. He's always been stone and bending, cold. He'll rule the realm into ash. Then bend the stone, Ned said. Join him, guide him. Don't destroy everything to sit in a chair made of swords. Renly chuckled bitterly. You always did think too highly of people. But then he surprised Ned. I'll consider it. One condition. What? Melisandre. She must be removed. Ned's eyes narrowed. You fear her. Renly's voice dropped. I've seen what she can do. Ned returned to the Red Keep with a glimmer of hope. But Melisandre already knew. The false king plots. I've seen it. In the flames, Stannis ordered Ned confined to his chambers. You betrayed me, he said flatly. I saved you. You acted without my consent. I acted to save the realm. And with that, Ned Stark, Warden of the North, former hand of the king, was placed under house arrest in the very castle he had helped win. And that's when everything broke at midnight. The walls of King's Landing shook. A shadow passed through. The gates silent, thin, impossibly fast. It slipped past guards, past torches, past locked doors, into Renly's tent. And when the sun rose, Renly Baratheon was dead. His throat slit from ear to ear. No sign of a struggle. No one saw an intruder. Only Laura's, screaming over his body, and Melisandre. She smiled. Kings must fall. Stannis denied it. I gave no such order. But the Tyrells didn't wait for truth. They fled south, furious and grieving. And in that vacuum of silence, Stannis marched south with his full force through the Reach, unopposed. Ned, now released, confronted Stannis one final time. Was it worth it? Stannis didn't answer, so Ned walked away. He took a single horse, left the Red Keep, and rode north, not to Winterfell, but to the Wall, because that letter from Lord Commander Mormont, it haunted him. He had fought for the throne. He had played the game, and now he saw the board for what it was. Petty kings, burning gods, and beyond it all, a darkness growing. I'm done with crowns, he said aloud, riding alone through the King's Road. Let them burn each other. But fate wasn't done with him, because north of the Wall, something ancient stirred, and soon Ned Stark would face a war that made thrones look like toys. Stay with me, stay with me. Catelyn Stark stood atop the battlements of Riverrun, the Raven's letter trembling in her hands. Renly was dead. Ned was gone. And now Stannis marched freely through the Reach, burning sept and stronghold alike where resistance lingered. The letter bore no signature, but its message was clear. A king has fallen. The Lord of Light rises. Word of Renly's death spread like wildfire, but no blade had been found, no killer caught. Loras Tyrell did not speak, but his grief boiled into rage. The Reach blamed Stannis quietly. House Tyrell turned its attention to another power. Two. The Boy King in the west, to Robb Stark, yes, Robb. With the realm bleeding and the capital in chaos, the Tyrells sent an envoy to the twins. There, among mourning and feasts, they whispered in the young wolf's ear, "Your father trusted honor. He was betrayed. What do you trust, my lord?" Robb's answer, "The North." But whispers grew louder. "Marry Margaery," they said. "Unite the North and the Reach. Bring fire to Stannis' doorstep." Back in King's Landing, the throne room had changed. The Iron Throne sat higher. Red banners had replaced the Lannister lions, and Melisandre now stood behind. Stannis during every decree. Prayers burned alongside prisoners. Stannis issued a new order. All gods but the Lord of Light are false. The sept of Baelor shall be cleansed. Ned Stark would have stopped it if he had still been there. But Ned rode alone, nearing Castle Black. And here's where things shift again, because the war for the throne was no longer just blood and banners. It was prophecy. It was fire. It was shadow. And the North had seen the future, and it was white beyond the wall. Jon Snow stood before the weeping ridge. The wildlings no longer ran. They begged. The dead march, they said. Not just whites. White shadows. Kings in ice. And something older. Ravens flew. Sam wrote, Jill Mormont sent word to every corner of the realm. Only two answered. 1. Ned Stark. 2. Maester Luwin of Winterfell. No one else listened south of the Neck. They were too busy naming kings and lighting pyres. In Dragonstone, Melisandre whispered of the long night, but claimed only her flames held salvation. Stannis is Azor, a high reborn, she declared. His sword is Lightbringer. He will save the world. But her Lightbringer burned no shadows, and still the dragons grew. Daenerys Targaryen, now in Slaver's Bay, watched her children Rhaegal, Viserion, and Dragon circle the skies. The fire in her veins pulsed with growing certainty. She would cross the narrow sea, and she would reclaim what was stolen from her bloodline. But first, she had to conquer the chains around her. And oh, she would. Back in Westeros, the people suffered starvation in the Riverlands, raids by Lannister and broken men turned to bandits. Every city outside the Crownlands feared fire either from dragon or priest. Tyrion, Lannister, having escaped King's Landing with Varys' help, now moved from city to city in disguise, observing, listening, writing, and waiting in winter. A boy knelt before the godswood, his breath visible in the early frost. Brand. He saw things in dreams, wolves and birds and trees that whispered his name. He saw a shadow kill a man with no sword. He saw a girl with silver hair walk into fire and come out with dragons. And he saw the wall cracking. He told Maester Luwin. Luwin told no one. Meanwhile, at Castle Black, Jon Snow found a riderless horse at the gates, its saddle torn, its flesh frozen, and its eyes blue. Mormont rallied the watch. We ride at dawn, we find what came for him, and we send it back to the grave. That night, Ned Stark arrived. They hadn't seen him in years. Jon embraced him workwardly, fiercely. No words needed, just the silence of family. But Jon saw the change in his father's eyes. There was no courtly weight, no politics, just focus, just fire and frost. What happened? Jon asked. I fought for a throne, Ned said. But now I know that Real war has never been in King's Landing. Together they rode out beyond the wall. 3 days later they didn't return, and that changed everything. Because Catelyn received a raven with just 4 words, "The dead are rising," and the world didn't listen, but Robb did. He called his bannermen to Moat Cailin. "We ride for the wall," he declared. "If my father has fallen, we bring him back. If he stands, we stand beside him." The north moved, and so did the dragons. Daenerys had broken the chains in Astapor. She now commanded 1,000 unsullied, and she had 3 dragons. Her eyes burned like embers. Her voice carried prophecy. "I will take what is mine with fire and blood." So now we have this: Stannis on the throne, burning gods and kings alike. Robb marching north, the young wolf ready for war. Daenerys crossing Slaver's Bay, dragons in her wake. And beyond the wall, death itself, waiting. But wait, here comes the twist you didn't see coming. Melisandre's fires show her a face. Not Stannis, not Daenerys, not Robb, but Jon Snow, kneeling before a weirwood tree, bleeding, dying, and rising again. And she smiles. The fire must die before it can be reborn. You still watching. Because we're not done. The game for the Iron Throne was never the real game. It was the distraction, the true war, that begins now. Snow fell on Castle Black like ash from a dying fire. The gates were sealed. The horns had sounded once for a ranger returning, then twice for enemies approaching. And now, 3 times the sound no one ever wanted to hear. The dead had come. Ned Stark stood atop the wall beside Jon Snow, both cloaked in black, both silent. Below them, a tide of corpses moved through the trees, not shambling, marching, whites in ancient armor, some still wearing faded cloaks of the first men, eyes glowing blue, weapons rusted but sharp. Among them, shadows loomed, taller, colder, white walkers, and at their center, a figure more terrible than either of them had ever seen. "The Night King. We can't hold them," Jon whispered. "We must," Ned replied. Jon looked to his father. "We're going to die here, aren't we?" Ned nodded. "Then we die with purpose." And so the battle began. Atop the wall, archers loosed flaming arrows. Oil poured over the edges, ignited mid-air. The dead didn't scream. They didn't retreat. They climbed, crawling over each other like insects, clawing into the stone, pulling down defenders as they rose. Jon fought like a man possessed, ghost at his side, sword flashing. Longclaw sang with each strike, its Valyrian steel cutting through the dead, like light through shadow. But it wasn't enough. The gate splintered, they poured in below. Sam, Tarley, and Maester Armin huddled in the library, burning scrolls just to stay warm. "This knowledge, it shouldn't be lost," Sam said. "It won't be," Aemon replied. "You'll live. I'm not leaving. You must." And Sam fled with a single raven, bound for the south, carrying one final message: the wall has fallen. And he was right, because within hours, the Night King reached the top of the wall and Jon Snow stood in his path. It was quiet now. Snow swirled like smoke. Jon lifted Longclaw. The Night King raised his hand, and then Ned Stark stepped between them. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He raised his sword ice, reforged from melted Stark steel, glowing faintly blue in the dark. The Night King paused, and then he charged. Steel met ice, and for a moment the world stopped, but ice shattered, and so did Ned, in one blow. The Night King drove a frozen blade through his chest. Ned staggered, blood steaming, and fell to his knees. "No," Jon screamed, running forward, but Ned looked back, just once. "Tell them winter is here." And then he fell. Jon didn't remember the next seconds, only that he fought, that he screamed, that Ghost was wounded, that the wall shook, and that somehow, in that moment, he lived barely. The Night King turned, uninterested in finishing him, because the wall had fallen, and the path to the south lay open, far away. In King's Landing, Stannis read the raven from the wall with stone-faced silence. Then he turned to Melisandre. "You said I was the chosen one." Her eyes flickered. The flames show a different path now. Stannis's jaw clenched. And what do they show? A wolf, rising from the snow, a sword reborn in darkness. And she smiled. "You are not the prince that was promised." And in that moment Stannis snapped. He ordered Melisandre burned in front of the sept. Her screams echoed across the city, and so the Red Keep became silent. No more shadows, no more fires, only a broken king, alone on a throne he never wanted to share. But the south was changing. Robb Stark had crossed the neck. Thousands marched behind him, his banner, the direwolf, his purpose, vengeance. The north had lost its father. They would not lose its son, and the Reach. Now leaderless, with Margarian mourning and Laura's gone missing, turned to Robb, too. Slowly, reluctantly, but surely, the realm began to shift, and across the narrow sea Daenerys sailed. Her dragons circled the skies. Her fleet blackened the horizon. Her eyes were set on the Iron Throne, but her ears heard another message from the Raven. "The wall has fallen." She paused. "What is dead may never die," Jorah said. "But fire can still burn them." Dany nodded. "Then we change course. We head north." And so the dragons turned in Winterfell. Bran opened his eyes. He had seen it all, his father's death, the rise of the Night King, the flames around Melisandre, and something else. A moment that hadn't happened yet. Jon Snow, dying and living. He summoned Maester Luwin. "Send word to the wall," he said, "or what's left of it. Tell them Jon must come here." Luwin asked why. Bran's voice was flat. "Because the gods aren't done with him yet." Back in Castle Black, the survivors counted heads. Jon, Sam, E.T. Gilly, barely 24 more. The rest were gone. And as Jon buried his father beneath the snow, he whispered, "I should have died." But Ghost nuzzled his hand. And Sam said, "Then maybe there's still something you need to do." And Jon felt it. Deep in his bones, a fire, flickering. Not Melisandre's, not Stannis's, something older. A memory, a whisper, a name. "You are." The song of ice and fire. And suddenly, he remembered something Bran had said once. About his mother. About the Tower of Joy. But that's not the end. Because as Jon prepared to leave the ruins of Castle Black, he turned to Sam. "I need you to do something for me." "What, if I don't make it back?" "Tell Dany the truth." And Sam said, "What truth?" Jon looked south. "That I'm not just Ned Stark's son, because now the world is unraveling. Stannis sits the throne, but alone. Robb marches south, banners at his back. Daenerys sails, dragons screaming across the sky. The Night King moves unchecked through the north. Ned Stark is dead, and Jon Snow walks into destiny, because next he dies, and then he returns. The Great War begins. You're still watching. Good, good. Snow swirled through the broken gate of Castle Black as Jon Snow rode south. The ruins of the wall behind him were silent, but the chill in the air was not from winter alone, it was death, creeping ever closer. The Night King had not stopped. He did not need rest, or reason, or mercy. Every village north of Last Hearth had gone quiet. Every soul fallen had risen to walk in his army. Jon didn't look back. His father's grave was still fresh. His duty lay ahead. At Winterfell, the gates opened. Robb Stark stepped out to greet him, grey wind howling beside him. He looked older, harder, his crown of bronze and iron sitting heavy on his brow. The two brothers embraced without words. Ghost and grey wind circled each other cautiously before settling near the godswood. "You saw him fall?" Robb asked. Jon nodded. He faced the Night King alone. Robb looked down. "He died a Stark." Jon's voice cracked. "He died trying to warn the world." And so they gathered what remained of the North. House Mormont, House Karstark, House Glover, and the Lords of the Vale. Brought reluctantly south by Lord Jon Royce after word from Sansa, but this was no war council for a crown. This was for survival. Jon stood before them all and spoke plainly. "The Night King has broken the wall. Every man, woman, and child in Westeros is now in danger. The dead do not stop. They do not reason. We must stand together, or we fall alone." And for the first time, no one argued, not even the Lords of the Reach, who had ridden with Marguerite to seek shelter in the north. Not even the Riverlands, who had sworn no new loyalty since Edmure's capture. Not even the Vale, who had watched the wars of men from their high towers for too long. This was no longer about who ruled. It was about who lived. And, as if in answer, the dragons arrived. The sky split with thunder as Dragon, Rhaegal, and Viserion soared above the battlements. The ground trembled as Daenerys Targaryen descended from her saddle in a swirl of snow and flame. She wore black and red, her silver hair whipping in the wind, and her eyes, those eyes met Jon's across the courtyard. "You sent the raven," she said. "I did. You spoke of death. It's coming." And they both understood. The war had changed. That night, by the fire, Jon and Daenerys sat apart from the others, the weight of legacy between them, of prophecy, of blood. "Why me?" she asked. "Why did you summon me?" "Because you're not like the others. You can't be burned. You have fire in your blood. And you," Jon hesitated, "starting to understand who I am." Daenerys turned. "Say it." "I'm the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. My mother was Lyanna Stark. Ned raised me, to protect us all." The silence was thunderous. Then Dany whispered, "Then you have a stronger claim to the throne than I do." Jon shook his head. "I don't want it, but it wants you." Before either could say more, Bran entered drawn, pale, his eyes distant. "He's closer now," Bran said. "The Night King, he's coming, and he knows who you are." Jon stood. "Then we meet him here." But Bran shook his head. "No. He'll go south. He doesn't want a battle. He wants destruction." "Then we take the fight to him," Robb said. "No," Bran replied, voice low. "We need to lure him here." "How?" Bran looked to Jon. "He wants you." Jon's blood froze suddenly. A voice cut through the quiet. Samwell Tarly, riding hard into the courtyard, breathless. In his hands, a scroll from Old Town. They've opened the sealed texts. The prophesieds, clearer now. What prophecy? Sam opened the scroll. "The prince that was promised shall be born of ice and fire. He shall fall." and rise. Again, and through his sacrifice, the darkness shall be undone. Jon's eyes met Brant's. He already knew, and here's the final moment. Jon Snow rode beyond the walls with Bran, Theon, Ghost, and a dozen men. They set the trap at the weirwood. Grove lit the fire pits, and waited. The Night King came at dusk. He came alone, and Jon faced him once. More no army, no dragons. Just himself, as the cold closed in. Jon raised Longclaw, and this time the blade burned blue. The fight was short, brutal, final dot. Jon struck once across the chest. The Night King staggered, then stabbed, through the heart, and everything shattered. The dead collapsed. The ice melted. The cold receded, and Jon. He fell. Bran reached him too late. His eyes closed. But he smiled. He had done what Ned could not, what Aegon could not, what Stannis never understood. He had saved the realm, not for a crown, but for the people, and as Daenerys wept beside his body, a single ember floated into the sky, and the snow began to thaw. Spring had come, and the Game of Thrones. It was over, but the story of the realm had just begun.